The snow was still falling lightly as I parked down the street from the house I grew up in. The windows were glowing amber with warmth, and I could see silhouettes moving inside, laughing, hugging, passing plates. It had been 3 years since I'd walked through that door. I paused with my hand on the key, bracing. This year, I'd told myself, would be different. I'd come out 6 months ago. Mom had replied with a carefully worded text that read more like a corporate HR memo than a mother's love. Dad hadn't said anything. My brother, Ben, had just sent a thumbs-up emoji. I stepped inside. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon hit me, flooding me with memories. For a moment, I let myself hope. "Hey," I said, smiling at Mom. She looked me over, my painted nails, the curls I'd finally let grow out, the soft sweater that made me feel like myself. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look different." I laughed nervously. "Good different, I hope." She turned back to the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready. You can eat in the car." I froze. "The car?" She busied herself with the gravy. "It's just your father's not comfortable, and it's not like we have space. The table's full." Ben looked up from his seat on the couch, a beer in his hand. "Why would you even come?" he said with a smirk. "You always want drama." I swallowed hard. "I came because it's Christmas. Because I thought maybe—" He laughed. "Well, maybe next year, bring a costume that looks more like you used to. That's the person we invited." No one said anything. No one stood up for me. I turned and walked outside. The cold hit harder than I remembered. I sat in the car with the engine off and my coat wrapped tight around me. I opened the plate Mom had handed me at the door. Cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, dried turkey. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then, slowly, I pulled out my phone. I texted Morgan, my roommate and chosen sister. "Hey, you still got leftovers?" She replied instantly. "Always. And real hugs, too." I looked at the glowing house one more time, and then I started the car and drove toward home. Would you like this adapted into a longer piece or from another perspective, like a sibling or a parent? The drive was quiet. Snowflakes flitting past the windshield like little ghosts. I turned off the radio. It felt wrong to hear cheery carols just then. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. My breath came shallow, but steady. That house behind me? It didn't feel like home anymore. Maybe it hadn't for a while. I'd just been too stubborn, too hopeful to admit it. Morgan lived across town, in a creaky old duplex with crooked steps and a front door that stuck in winter. I called it a shoebox. She called it a haven. Tonight, it was everything I needed. She opened the door before I even knocked. "You look frozen," she said, dragging me into the warmth. She wrapped me in a blanket before I could speak. Her Christmas tree stood in the corner, slightly lopsided, covered in mismatched ornaments and beautiful in its imperfection. Like her, she handed me a cup of hot cider and didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. "I shouldn't have gone," I said finally, curling into her couch. I don't know what I was expecting. A movie moment, I guess. "You were expecting people to be decent," Morgan said, sitting beside me. "That's not on you. They told me to eat in the car." She flinched, then stood up. "Okay, that's it." She marched to the kitchen, muttering, "You're getting a real dinner, not some exile in a plate special." I laughed, really laughed, and felt something uncoil in my chest. Later, we sat side by side eating mac and cheese, cranberry chutney, and slices of honey ham from the deli. We watched old Christmas movies with terrible dialogue and fake snow. I leaned against her, and she didn't flinch when I cried, just handed me tissues, one by one, like she was used to catching all the pieces of me. "I'm proud of you, you know," she said softly as the credits rolled. "For going, for leaving, for being you." I didn't say anything, just nodded, pressing my forehead to her shoulder. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Ben. One line, "You really made Mom cry. Hope it was worth it." I stared at it, fingers hovering above the screen. Then I deleted it. I didn't reply. Not this time. Instead, I got up, made breakfast with Morgan, and started my own Christmas tradition with people who saw me accepted me, loved me. Blood might be thicker than water, but it sure as hell wasn't warmer. And from now on, I was done sitting in cold cars. Would you like this to continue further? Perhaps into the new year, or into a confrontation or reconciliation arc? The days between Christmas and New Year's have always felt like a strange limbo, like the world is holding its breath before starting over. I stayed at Morgan's for the rest of the week. She insisted. I didn't argue. We didn't do anything extravagant. Just small, good things. Hot tea in the mornings, a puzzle spread across her kitchen table, walks in the cold where the snow crunched like sugar beneath our boots. She didn't ask about my family again, and I didn't bring them up, but every now and then, the silence would press in. On one of those gray afternoons, I checked Facebook. I don't know why. Maybe I was trying to measure the distance between us, me and the version of my family that still smiled for pictures. There it was, a photo from the Christmas dinner. Everyone gathered around the table. My seat was visibly empty. Someone had placed a centerpiece in front of it, like trying to hide the absence. And then I saw the caption Mom had written, "Family is everything. Grateful to be together." Something cracked in me then, not from anger, from clarity. I closed the app. On New Year's Eve, Morgan and I hosted a tiny gathering, just a few friends from her work and our building. I was nervous. My social battery had been on life support for days, but when people started coming in with drinks and music and stories, something inside me sparked. One of the guests, Jules, brought champagne and an energy that filled the room. They complimented my sweater, asked about my art, and really listened when I spoke. At midnight, as fireworks popped in the sky beyond the window, we all stood together in the cramped living room, counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A chorus of cheers, hugs, laughter, music swelling. Jules turned to me and said, "So, what are you leaving behind this year?" I thought about the question, about the car, the plate of cold food, the silence around that table. And then I smiled. "Shame," I said. "I'm leaving behind shame." They raised their glass. Hell yeah to that. A few days later, an email came from Mom. Not a text, not a call. An email. The subject line read, "Let's talk." I stared at it for a while. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because for the first time in my life, the weight of being excluded wasn't crushing me. Because I'd found a life outside the table I wasn't welcome at. Because I was finally starting to build something that was mine. And because this time they could wait. It was late January when I finally opened the email. It wasn't long. Just a few stiff paragraphs from Mom saying she regretted how things unfolded, and that perhaps someday we could revisit the conversation as a family. There was no apology, no mention of Ben's comment, no acknowledgement of the car, the plate, the silence. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a half-buried landmine. I closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and realized something I hadn't known until that moment. I didn't need anything from her anymore. I had always believed that if I said the right thing, with the right clothes, soften enough edges, they'd let me back in. That maybe love was something you could earn. But love isn't a reward. And family isn't performance. That weekend, Morgan and I hosted a dinner. We cleared off the puzzle from the kitchen table, lit a bunch of mismatched candles, and filled the apartment with the smell of garlic, rosemary, and something sweet in the oven. We invited friends, old and new. Jules brought dessert. Our neighbor brought wine. Someone brought a stray dog they were petsing that insisted on curling under my chair. We talked about nothing and everything. We laughed until our faces hurt. At one point, Morgan stood and raised her glass. "To family," she said, looking right at me. "The kind we choose and the kind we become." I looked around at this table full of warmth and noise and imperfection. There was no performance here, no conditions, just presence, just love. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full, not just from the food, from being seen, being known, being safe. So no, I didn't go back to that house. I didn't need to, because I had finally come home.